I call the regular Open Space Commission meeting to order for January 22nd, 2024. Pursuant to ARS 38-431-02, notice is hereby given to the members of the commission and to the general public that at this work session, the commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for legal advice and discussion with the commission's attorneys for legal advice on any item listed in the following agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3. So at this point, I guess we will do roll call. Robert, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Applin.
Present.
Commissioner Norton.
Present.
Commissioner Fox. Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Wallen.
Present.
Commissioner White.
Present.
Council Representative Deborah Harris.
Move on then to the land acknowledgement statement. The Flagstaff Open Spaces Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home. And with that, we will move to the approval, item number 5, the approval of the December 11th, 2023 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion or corrections to the minutes as they're written? Anyone from the commission?
I'd make that motion. There were 2 minutes sent out. First minutes were corrected. And so I make the motion that we set the second minutes that were sent out.
And I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the meeting minutes for December 11th are approved. So we're down to public participation. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject that's not scheduled before the commission on this day. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or acting on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time that the item is heard. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak on a subject that is not on the agenda for tonight? If you could state your name and
Oh, okay. My name is Duffy Westheimer. Hello, commission members and chair. What? Oh, okay, thanks. At the last meeting, there was the request to have the bond language and establishing documents identified for you all for the natural area on Observatory Mesa. And I would just like to request that that be made available to the public as soon as possible so we can review it before the next meeting when it comes before you.
appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on a subject that's not on the agenda for tonight? Okay, seeing no one else, we will move down to business items. But before we start on the business items, I just want to give a couple of reminders and a couple of requests. For the commission, please speak up for the microphone, and remember that you need to push the button to speak. And if you could raise your hand to be recognized by the chair for any questions or comments, that would be appreciated for those that are online as well. So we also have a good representation, city staff at the meeting. So this meeting is a chance to get all of your questions answered, get everything out on the table, make your comments, ask all of your questions. And for the public, please fill out a comment or a speaker card in order to speak, and state your name, and remember that there's a 5-minute limit for comments. And so item number A on our business items is the continued conversation on the Hidden Hollow Road access through Observatory Mesa Natural Area. So just a few quick items on how we'll approach this. See this as doing a recap from the last meeting provided by staff, and answering some of the questions that were brought up at the prior meeting. The possible property owner presentation, if they so desire, to speak. Then we'll take public comment, and then the commission will discuss this amongst ourselves. So hopefully that goes smoothly as we go through this. So staff, would you like to
Sure.
recap our last meeting? And
Yep. I'm happy to jump in. Kevin Finsel, Deputy City Attorney. Robert Wallace has pawned this off on me again. So I'll be speaking at least at the beginning to kick this thing off. And for those who were not at the last meeting who are wondering why the Deputy City Attorney is up here talking about this item, it's really because this item has been going back and forth between different city departments for, gosh, almost since I've been here. So probably since 2015. So probably about 8 or 9 years. We've seen different iterations of this request, or at least questions related to this topic. And I represent sustainability. I represent open space. So I've been involved. So I know about this probably more than most people in this room. So they've asked me to step in and provide some of the background if I can, and answer any questions. So that's why I'm here. It's not often you see me up here talking, but in this case, I'll do Robert a favor and help him out. So I want to give a review of what we talked about last time, and I won't get into the same level of detail, but I'll try to give a brief overview of why we're here tonight. Is this microphone, it sounds like it's, okay, it's working. It sounds weird to me. So this is the area we're talking about, and I'll do a better job of, I can throw some other maps up if we need to zoom in on some things. So we'll work through that. But this is the map of the Observatory Mesa. The yellow sections are the city-owned sections up there, and section 6 is the section we're talking about. So I'll refer to it as the northern section for ease of discussion. And Robert has a red circle there that identifies really where the Observatory Mesa parcel interacts with the private parcels to the east of it. And this is zoom in of section 6. They're outlined in blue. The red parcels or red outlines are the private parcels that we're talking about here tonight. So when we talk about the private property owners, it's the owners of those 7 parcels. And then on this map, you now see the yellow, we call it an easement. Technically, according to the state document, it's right of way, but we'll call it the same thing, at least for this discussion. So if you hear the easement or the right of way, it's the same thing. But so really what's going on here is prior to the city purchasing Observatory Mesa, that easement was granted to one of the then private property owners in red. I can't remember which parcel she owned, a woman by the name of Bia Lee. I hope that's how you pronounce her name. She went to the state and obtained a right-of-way or an easement to build a road to provide access to her parcel. So that's been in place since about 1986. And so that was sitting there when we purchased Observatory Mesa. So fast forward to the city purchasing Observatory Mesa, we took control of those properties, we purchased those properties subject to all easements and other encumbrances. That BLE easement being one of them. So we knew about it. It was in all the paperwork. It's not a surprise. We were always aware that that easement sat on that parcel. And like I said, since about 2015, for different reasons, sometimes it's someone looking to purchase one of the parcels up there, or it's somebody looking to talk about building the road. We've been getting these questions about what can we do up there? Can we build our road? We're having trouble building our road. And a lot of those questions were just coming in and out of our community development department and our sustainability group, and didn't really have the best answers. We didn't really have the best plans from the property owners. We were just, we were kind of kicking around the best way to approach this type of request. Because the real issue with that easement, and the property owners can talk about this a little bit more, and they have an engineer that they're working with, and he may be here as well, is that easement grants them the right to build 30-foot wide road or right of way. Where the easement lies is not actually where the current dirt road lies that they use for access to their parcels. So through these discussions, the question was, do you want us to build within the easement, or do you want us to build on the current road that's already been impacted by use and driving cars? If we want them to stay within the easement, that is that yellow line, from an engineering perspective, it's very difficult. There's a lot of topography issues, and staying with that easement is, I don't know if I'd call it impossible. I'm not an engineer, but it's the way it's been explained to us, it'd be very difficult. And again, you'd be impacting land that currently is not impacted by that dirt road. So those were really where the discussion centered, is how best to do this, how to allow the access that those private property owners have a right to, but also protect the Observatory Mesa, which we purchased and obviously put a conservation easement on top of to protect it as open space. So we've really been dealing with those tensions. Not this group, but I'll say the time before, we had discussions, and we really ended up with telling the property owners that they needed to work through state parks first, because state parks controls the easement or manages the easement. I don't know the best terminology, but we thought we came to an agreement that it made sense to start with state parks first, because state parks at some point has to approve it, any work that's done up there. That was probably 3-4 years ago when we did that. And then when this most recent group came in, and some of them are the same. So when I talk about different groups, I'll just talk about different iterations of the group. But when this most recent request came in, that was our initial response was, well, first you got to get state parks. Well, the property owners went to state parks, and state parks said, no, you've got to get the city to approve it first. So now we've got us pointing at the state parks and state parks pointing at us, trying to figure out who needs to take the first step here. So ultimately we decided to keep it. So then it started going through our process of, I'll call it just a concept plan review to look at this road. And we started having internal discussions, staff and the property owners, to get a better understanding of what they were looking to propose, what limitations they have with the current easement. And that's ultimately, we went back and forth, multiple meetings, working with their plans, revising their plans. And I think where we're at right now is they have the best plan set from an engineering perspective, according to them and their engineer. And I think even from our engineers' perspectives that have been in the meetings I've been in. But that best plan from an engineering perspective does not sit within the easement that they currently have. So the request before that's going to ultimately end up at council and is for you for a recommendation is whether or not to approve an amendment or a revision of that easement. And there are pros and cons, obviously, on both sides. But that's really why we're here. You have those property owners with a right to access their parcels. They're trying to use it. And I should back up a little bit. If you had the property owners up here, they would say, fine, we'll build a 10-foot road and on the current dirt road that's up there, and they'd probably be fine with it. But we don't allow that because we need it to meet certain specifications for public safety, for our fire trucks to get back there if something happens, if there's a fire, if there's some emergency at one of those parcels. So when we talk about the road requirements, which is really another reason why they're here, those are our road requirements. That's because we told them you have to build, and it's really a driveway a certain way to a certain specification, and width and material, as well as slope or Yeah, I'll call it slope. So because of all that, when you put that into the engineering world and they try to construct it, it just doesn't really work within the easement as it's written. So does anybody have, any of the commission members have any questions about what I just said there? Okay, so this is probably where I'm gonna jump to my screen because this is just the plans. So I'm gonna share my screen so I can zoom in on these plans a little bit. And I've got this set up, hopefully. And hopefully this will help people in the audience as well as online see what we're talking about here. So I start here with the legend, and then this is important when we start zooming in on these plans. So the green there, that's the existing 30-foot, again, right away that they have, that's the BLE easement. So when you map out that right they got back in 1986, it is that green line. The black line or the gray shaded line with the black borders, that is where from an engineering perspective, they're telling us the best place to put the road. Underneath all of that is, I'm going to try to get this right. You'll see, and it's not on here, but we'll see it when we pull up the map. You'll see where the dirt road is as well. So you have the black, which is the best place from their perspective to put the road from an engineering perspective. You have the green, which is the current easement or their rights. And then you have the blue underneath, I think it's blue, that shows where the dirt road is. And I think that's important because from like Robert's perspective or open space perspective, that area is impacted. So ideally, you would, from one perspective, I guess you would look at it and say, we would try to stay within where that dirt road currently already is because it's already been impacted. Why create a new road if you don't have to? So it's something to keep in mind. The red area there that you'll see at some places on this map is the area that will be temporarily impacted, I'll call it, where they will need a temporary easement of some kind in order to construct the road, and that's to account for things like slope and other areas that may be impacted while they actually construct the road, because there is some pretty significant topography up here. So they may have to do some fill for safety reasons. So we don't have these steep drop-offs on the side of the road, and you may have to cut into some of the land up there to actually allow the road to be built. But from their engineering perspective, and their engineer told us this, that red area would be temporary impact, but then would be mitigated by them and revegetated and everything along those lines. But those are the different colors we'll see on this map. And sorry, I'm going to fumble around here a little bit because I don't have the best way to zoom in. But I want to focus on a few different sections because when you look at this and you look at those different areas being mapped over one another, the green, the blue, and the black, you'll see why kind of the pros and cons to amending the easement and some of the issues that they're dealing with. And we'll start over here. And so this is really the start of Observatory Mesa, where I have my mouse way over here, or the Observatory Mesa parcel. And so you can see where the green and the black and the blue line up is ideal, because that's basically saying this is where we want to build the road. It's within or very close to the easement boundaries, and it's actually on top of the blue mark, which is where the dirt road currently sits. So we're within the easement and minimal impacts because it's already impacted roadway. But then you see up as you move along, you get into this area is like one of the first areas where you see the green, which is again the easement or where they have rights to construct, where from an engineering perspective, it just doesn't work very well. And when you look at these maps, the closer the lines, the steeper the slope. So as you see them get really, really close together there, you're talking about really steep topography. And so they're basically running that road across a ridge. And that's why from an engineering perspective, they've chosen some of these areas as to avoid not only some, I'll call them canyons, but also some pretty steep slope areas. So this is the first area where the black or the proposed amended easement is in line with the blue. So it's the blue that's already impacted is within where they want to build. So they're trying to stay where it's already been impacted, but it definitely goes outside of the easement itself. So in considering this request, that's that first point where you start to think, well, what makes more sense from an open space commission perspective? To force the property owners to stay within the green line, which is area that hasn't been impacted yet, or to stay where they're proposing it or put it where they're proposing it to be, which is on that blue line that's already impacted and just a better roadway from an engineering perspective. And that's really where we see it's about 4 places along with these maps where it comes out. This is another one, same thing. So you see the green and you see in this section, the proposed roadway is really tracking the current dirt road up there. And then you see that for most of the way. This right here, these are drainage inlets. This is basically drainage under the road. We won't talk about that too much tonight unless somebody has questions. We may have someone from stormwater on, but just so that's what that is. That's what those little black marks are. Again, the green. So this is the first area when we looked at these, and I think it was the most significant area we were looking at, because you see now we have the black line of the proposed road actually doesn't match the blue anymore. So it's not following the current dirt road. And so the first question was why? And the explanation from the engineer is that this is a pretty steep slope area. So if you follow the easement and you can see you kind of drop down and then you come back up. And so it would require a lot of grading if it were even possible. And so from an impact perspective, I think what the engineer was looking at doing is, again, staying along more of a ridge design and running across that ridge rather than dropping down and coming back up. And because of the requirements of that driveway, which is a 10-degree slope, 10-degree max, that's way more than 10 degrees. And so they would really have to grade that down in order to get that slope so it's not so steep. And again, that is our requirement for building this driveway. So what the engineer is doing is avoiding that area and staying along that ridge where it makes more sense. But this is that, I think it is really the main area where the black doesn't meet the blue anymore, which is unfortunate, but that's the reason why they're doing it. From there, it pretty much continues that same. I mean, even here, it's like the beginning. They all 3 seem to match. And then going to really, this is where it meets the private property. It seems to match up here. So you can see it's really just that one area that is, I think, pretty inconsistent when you're trying to figure out, you would love to see either you're staying within the easement or you're at least tracking that dirt road. And that's that one area where you're not, but it's a pretty significant issue with topography, and that's why they're doing it. One thing you'll notice here is that when you look at the BLE easement, the current easement, this, again, that's the green, right? So you have this green running all the way across the private properties. So when the state granted it, they kept that easement or right of way on state land. In talking with the property owners, we kept stressing to them, put your best package together, make the best package you can for the commission and for the council. And this was one of the areas that we talked about, because the suggestion was put it on your land. If you're going to build a road there where you see the gray now, put it on your side. Less you don't impact Observatory Mesa. You're actually taking some land that's currently encumbered, and it's going to no longer be encumbered based on your request. So they did that, and I want to point that out because I thought that was important. Same thing here at the end. This doesn't reflect it, but that hammerhead turnaround. So that's a turnaround point. We saw this last set of plans. We identified that as well and said, why not just put that on your own land? And they've agreed to that. So this shows that hammerhead coming back onto city property. In the final plans, it won't. They saw that and had no problem moving that onto their property. So I want to point that out as well. And so in tracking that, like I said, I think we called out the main point of concern, I think, with the plan, but I want to go back to the legend here because they provided some interesting numbers here. So The current, as you can see there, the current green right-of-way is 3.54 acres. The proposed easement to the parcels, that black outline drops down to 2.7. And really, I think one of the main reasons why is giving up that land that along their parcels. So it actually, when you look at the end of the day, if this were to be approved, that amount, that's the size of the easement would actually shrink a little bit. Now, on the other side of that is the red. So you see the red there. That area, like I said, will be impacted. I mean, their engineer just says it's part of the construction process. They would need to, it would be a temporary construction easement to allow them to get on those sections of the parcel. And they would be impacted. As you can see there, it's grading a lot of it and grading the slope, but it would be then mitigated. We'd have specific mitigation requirements in any easement saying, you know, you could impact it, but here's how you'd have to revegetate it, and here's what you'd have to do to prevent any erosion and everything along those lines. So that has been discussed. They're perfectly comfortable with that. But I just want to make sure that we don't ignore that. That will be impacted, but it'll be mitigated. But even when you put the 2.7 acres and you add on that, you know, the 1.05 of red, which is impacted but then mitigated, you're looking at 3.75. You're looking at a little bit bigger than the current easement, but then an acre that's going to come back. So that's really what these maps show for the people in the audience. And I don't know if you'll take a break, but hopefully people had a chance to look at the maps in the back. They're in the back of the room if you want to look at them, and you can dig into them a little bit more. But I think that's really the issue that the commission and then the council will be dealing with is the request to amend that green to the black to allow them to build this driveway back to those parcels for access. Did I miss anything with that summary? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if anytime we want to look at those maps, I can pull them back up. We do have a hand up, but I'm just going to address that hand. We're not going to take questions during this discussion. The chair will be asking for public comment later in the meeting. And at that point, we'll take questions both from people in the room and as well as online. So going back, so these are the maps. I'm just going to flip through them. Again, if we can come back and I can zoom in on any pieces we want to. So when we ended the meeting last week, last month, we got a lot of questions from the commission, and I think we did the best job we could, the three of us sitting up here answering those based on the information we had. But we know there were some questions more specific to community development and fire. So we have representatives from community development here as well as fire. And then Robert here to talk about open space. So I think where we're going to go here is just start walking through some of the questions we heard last time. Of course, we're not limited to those. You can always add questions, but so we'll start walking through these questions as our follow-up. Just get those answered before we start getting new ones. But it sounds like we have a question already.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
The red hashed areas, that's actually cut and fill, right? So you can imagine if you cut into the side and then fill down the side, you don't put it back to the way it was. It's not part of it's part of the construction, but it doesn't go back to the way it was. Is
Right,
that
and
correct?
yeah, I was pretty loose language there. It will be mitigated vegetation wise. The idea would be it would be revegetated with I think we have a specific seed we use up there when we have this type of mitigation. So yes, you're correct. It may not look the same from a slope perspective because it's been graded or filled, but it would be hopefully brought back to more of a natural state rather than just a bunch of dirt out there. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Question about the area where there was the greatest variance between the existing dirt road and where the new proposed easement would be. So that really large loop in the road. Has there been any discussion about requiring restoration or mitigation of the existing dirt road to bring it to a natural state after it's all said and done?
I don't recall if we discussed that, but If we haven't, I don't think that would be an issue from the property owner's perspective to mitigate that area. And it's definitely something we can add into any revised easement or amended easement.
I would like to just remind the commissioners if we can, we're going to have a set part of this at the end to discuss and questions at the end for us. So if we could hold our questions, that would be great.
Okay, so if we're gonna move on then, I think Robert's gonna jump up first and start talking, try to answer some of the questions that came up related to open space.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin, for that summary and your expertise. And I really appreciate all the staff members that came out to support the commission tonight. Really appreciate that. So I was just going to address these couple of quick questions here and let me know if you have any questions on these. But just as a recap, in 2014, the city accepted a Growing Smarter grant from the state of Arizona. And that provided the state with a conservation easement to protect and preserve Observatory Mesa. Because this right of way was prior to the conservation easement, Arizona State Parks does recognize the right and holders of the right of way to access these private properties. The right of way does allow for construction of public driveway within the right of way as set by the conservation easement standards. There are parameters for the conservation easement. Given the acquisition process, Arizona State Parks holds that conservation easement in its entirety, and it dictates the type of improvements that are allowed in the natural area. This is the legal mechanism to protect the natural area and baseline conditions of the property. According to the conservation easement, they are required to approve the improvements and development of the property. So a next step for this, if this went as far as city council, would be for Arizona State Parks to provide a review period. The city is allowed to improve up to 20 acres of the natural area for appropriate uses such as defined in the trailhead or the conservation easement, trailheads, trails, parking, signs, etc. The conservation easement also states that the Observatory Mesa natural area is used for the protection of wildlife habitat, preservation of rare and native plant communities, environmental education, scientific research, provisions controlled by public access for passive recreation as well, such as wildlife viewing and non-motorized use of trails, as well as construction of traditional uses, continuation of traditional uses. In accordance with the conservation easement, there is a limit to development in the natural area of up to 20 acres that may be eligible for alteration or development. So some of the possible impacts, the legal description for the current right-of-way, as Kevin mentioned, encompasses 3.52 acres. The proposed right-of-way for the 20-foot driveway would encompass 2.7 acres. However, the total estimated area to be impacted during the construction of the driveway would be about 3.75 acres. The additional 1.05 acres that would be impacted could be rehabilitated with vegetation, as was mentioned. The road, if the road was heavily used, the section in the corner of that natural area, section 6, is about 48 acres that that possibly could affect the movement of wildlife over the road. And then, as mentioned before, there are some northern goshawk nest areas that have been identified within the natural area. It's a post-fledgling area, as identified by the Forest Service in 1993. And that spans across City Forest Service and Lowell Observatory properties. Additionally, in 2016, the Forest Service did locate 2 northern goshawk nests in Section 6. There's not a formal post-fledgling area in this area. But the drainage area that was deferred for mechanical cutting to help protect sensitive species. And then I believe we asked a little bit about conflicts with the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan that we've been currently working on. The developments in this proposal include new trails, parking signage, and will amount to about 8.2 acres of development. Plus, we have about a quarter of acres that's already been developed. So the total acreage developed, if the entire plan was proposed as is currently, would be 11.5, a little bit over 11.5 acres. And I'm also available for questions should you have any.
Commissioner White?
I have a question that has to do with the term baseline. It shows up in the easement. And basically, the way I understand it is when the easement was signed and delivered, everything that's there now is the baseline. And anything that changes after that has to go to the state parks for decision of whether it goes or not. So you said, I think, that if this easement change, will have to go to the state parks. Is that correct?
The existing right-of-way was accounted in the baseline documentation when the conservation easement was created, since it pre-exists our current conservation easement. Anything that's done outside of the current right-of-way would have to get approved by Arizona State Parks and their process.
So it's only those little sections where it deviates from the blue line that the state parks would be making a judgment on. But would they also be making a judgment on the fact that the easement was there, but the development wasn't there? It was just a little dirt road that went up. And so do they have to make a judgment on 20-foot wide, 80,000 GW capacity?
I'm sure that would probably be part of their process, but that might be a better question for them. I do believe that we have an Arizona State Parks representative that is with us this evening. So when we get to their portion, maybe you could ask that question again.
Robert, I have just a quick clarification question. You mentioned 11.5 acres. Is that the amount that will be disturbed or changed based for the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan? So that's a total of 11.5 acres just in that section 6, or?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to clarify. We do have some pre-existing development that has happened, that happened obviously prior to the conservation easement. Since the conservation easement, we do have some minor development such as signage and fencing and that sort of thing. That is included in the development of the property. And then if the property was further developed with the implementation of the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan that we've been looking at, that those two totals could total about 11 acres, excluding prior development that was considered in the baseline documentation.
Thank you.
Great. Well, if there's no further questions for me at this time, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alexandra Pucciarelli. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Alexandra Pucciarelli, and I'm the current planning manager at the city of Flagstaff. So my team looks at development proposals that come into the city and reviews them according to our zoning code. So I can answer some of these questions from the planning standpoint. These parcels are currently zoned rural residential, RR. The code states that where public water supply and public streets are not available to serve the property, that the maximum density allowed is 1 unit per every 5 acres. So looking at all of these parcels, either individually or all together, that it's a little over 114 acres by my calculations, and it results in 23 units. That would be the maximum density allowed in this area with their current entitlements and current, we'll say current zoning entitlements. All of these parcels, the smallest parcel up there is over 6 acres. So all of those parcels are too big to allow a lot split, which is an administrative process. Any division of property that occurs on any of these parcels would trigger a subdivision requirement. State statute talks about anything over 2.5 acres goes through a subdivision process. Combinations could be allowed, but that wouldn't affect the density. As I said, I looked at it both as all these lots individually. What is the maximum density versus if they were all combined together? So it ends up with the same number of units. I think it's important to note that the proposed easement does not meet the city's street standards. Our I guess our smallest standards for a public street requires a right-of-way width of 44 feet. So with their current request of this 30-foot easement, they could not build anything that would meet our public street standards. And I point this out because that really curtails their ability to do any sort of additional development, any sort of subdivisions up there, that they'd have to come back to this location and ask for additional right-of-way. As far as utilities, again, if they were going through the subdivision process, that can trigger the requirement for public improvements, so public streets and public water and sewer. The city does not just provide the utilities. That would not be a responsibility of the city. It would be the responsibility of the developer to design and pay for the creation of those utilities. I think
You want me to take 3? I think 3 is, we could put a lot of restrictions in an easement. I think the current easement already has a lot of restrictions in it. If you've looked at that easement, it has things like reporting any impact to flora. It talks about mitigating any area that's impacted. I think our intention would be any revised easement would have the same or very similar restrictions or conditions put into it. Going back to the utility one, that request, I think, if I remember correctly from the property owner, was really just to say, if we're gonna construct that road, would we have any problem putting electricity underneath that road while we're there? I think that was the request, and you can ask the property owners to confirm that, but so when you see bullet point number 2, Alex is correct, we would not do that. That would be on them to pay for. But the request was the current easement doesn't mention anything about utilities or being a utility easement, but they did make that request since they're already impacting the area. Can they drop some, I would assume electricity, maybe broadband or something like that in there, but we're not talking water sewer at that point. That was not where that request was coming from, just to clarify that one. We did ask about bullet point 4. We tried to get in touch with our colleagues at the county, and I think the answer we have up to this point would be there wouldn't be any impact there. There would be no trigger. There would be no trigger for the county to do anything if this easement was revised, and then the road constructed. Am I saying anything wrong there, Rebecca? I think, no, I think that's correct. So that was the answer to bullet point number 4. Any other questions for, and I'm sorry, it's really up to you, Chair. Do you want to take questions on these different areas, or do you want to wait for all the questions at the end?
If we can, if there's any questions for this specific part of it,
Okay.
and then the general discussion we'll have at the end. Commissioner White.
Thank you. The 44, could you explain that again? 44-foot
The
something?
width of a road. So I think it's our rural residential cross-section requires a right-of-way dedication of 44 feet, which is wider than the easement that they have now and wider than the easement that they are requesting.
Can
Yeah,
I
so-
clarify something there real quick? Just so we're all on the same page. What Alex is saying is that the current request for this amended easement would allow for them to construct a driveway. And that it would be a driveway. It wouldn't be a city road. So a driveway has certain limitations. It's narrower, it's 20 feet wide. It can be aggregate, which is this design. You're not going to see curb gutter sidewalk like you would see in a normal roadway in a neighborhood or anything like that. So it's really a driveway design. What Alex is saying is when you get into the subdivision process and you start talking about creating a subdivision, generally speaking, that's when you start talking about a subdivision requiring to meet our roadway standard. So that's where that comment came from, is that, and I think it's really going to this idea that we got questions last time about what could happen up there. Could they subdivide? Could you subdivide and build an entire, neighborhood up there? And this is one of those limitations we talked about, which is that would kick in these subdivision requirements, and they would essentially be required to build a roadway standard, which is much larger, as Alex described, in addition to once you get over a certain number, which we'll talk about later, you'd start talking about secondary access, which they don't have. And so that roadway standard, once you trigger that, as Alex said, they'd have to come back in and ask for a revised easement. And I will just say this process has taken 8 years. I doubt that would ever happen. I don't think you're going to have any commission or council ever approve a 40, 50-foot wide easement up there. So that's why she's mentioning that, is these are those limitations it's hard for us to say exactly what can be built up there, but that's one of those limitations they're going to run into if they start triggering those subdivision requirements. But they're not there yet. They're just building a driveway.
Commissioner Norton.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So the new information tonight, that varies from the last time we talked about it. You'd said maybe 30 units maximum up there. So the new information is really it's 23 units maximum up there.
I think the 30 was based on restrictions because of fire code. And then I'm providing this information that's further limiting it based off of the zoning and the lack of public water and public streets.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I'll be here the rest of the night, so I can answer questions.
Thank you.
Chairman, we have someone on the screen with their hand up. I assume she's not a member of the commission. I don't know the commission very well. Is she just a guest? Okay, so guest comments will come up later. I just want to remind everybody that we're going to get through the presentation, and then the chair will take questions and comments from the audience here and then people online. Sorry. Okay, just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing a commission member up there.
We're good.
So next we have some fire department, and Alex talked about these a little bit. You see Chris Jack just pop on, but I'll just kind of frame the discussion here a little bit. So we did talk about last week about the limitations from a fire code perspective. So a driveway, Chris can answer any questions here, but I'll just summarize it really quick. The driveway standard allows 30 units to serve 30 units. So that's where we got the 30 number last time. We're trying to find these limitations so we can do our best to answer what kind of is worst case scenario up there, which is I think what's on everybody's mind. So from a fire code perspective, the fire code would allow the driveway that would provide the public safety access they need, but you can only have 30 units. And the one caveat to that, the only way they can give above 30 from a fire code perspective, and again, you got to remember what Alex just said from a zoning code perspective, but from a fire code perspective, the only way to get above 30, they can go to 50 if every unit built up there is sprinklered. which every unit would have to be sprinkled from day one, and you'd have to have water to have those sprinklers. And that is, and you can ask some of these questions to the property owners. I think you'll have one in particular tell you that he's looked into this for many years and it is pretty much near impossible. But those are the fire code restrictions that we talked about last time. Chris, do you have anything to add on there that I missed, or, and if not, Chris is available for questions.
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. I can go over the specifications for a fire apparatus access road if need be. Otherwise, I'm here for any questions.
Great, thanks, Chris. And that fire apparatus access road is actually in your, it's in your packet. But yeah, Chris can talk about it, but that's where we get the 20-foot wide and the different slope requirements.
Commissioner White?
Yes, is there any limitation to a length of a driveway?
So on the fire apparatus access road, there is not. That's why we have the turnarounds at the end. There at the property, we have the hammerheads that were shown on the map. That way we can get turned around at that point. There's no limitation on a single road though.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Norton?
I just wanted to ask, is, from a stock fire standpoint, is this as proposed the smallest road possible to meet the requirements?
Yes, the 20-foot is the minimum requirements in the fire code. That's what is adopted by the city, but it is also the same as adopted by the state. So the state actually adopts a minimum standard that covers the entire state. So we have to meet that or exceed it, and we meet them right on.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Is it required to have the driveway plowed during the winter time?
Yes, they would have to create a maintenance proposal, and I believe they have one to maintain clearing it of snow and then also any repairs to the road. If the road got damaged somehow, they would have to repair that and bring it back to the standard.
Can I follow up on that? So and that is one, let's lean over to Robert. We are missing that slide. We talked a lot last time about some potential conditions and some of the agreements that we've already reached preliminarily with the property owners. And that was one of them, is that they would definitely have to maintain it. It would be their responsibility. And we would build that into the easement and likely probably enter into some sort of agreement outside of it with an entity they would have to form, whether it's some sort of HOA. But put that on so that requirement stays. But yes, we talked about that. Going back to your question about fire, yeah, we asked Chris that question multiple times, and I think we're all comfortable that this is a safe. It provides access for our public safety, for our fire department, and it is really the smallest impact we could create. There was another option, Chris, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. That was maybe narrower. I can't remember the design, but it required pullouts, where you'd have to, like, every so often you'd have to have a pull out so cars could pass. And when we looked at that option, it was pretty much the same impact, and it just did not work very well. So we've hammered that home with Chris a lot.
So that's how you got to the 30-foot width. 20 foot is minimum width, and this will be a 30-foot width street.
No, the driveway will be 20 feet. The easement is 30. So it allows for a little bit of drainage on the side. And, but yeah, the road itself, the requirement's 20. The easement is the 30. Chris, did I say anything wrong there?
No, that's right. And on that thinner road, another thing that takes that ability out is the WUI code that we use provides for driveways. The driveway standard is limited to only 5 dwellings. Well, we have 7 parcels up there, so we would already exceed that if somebody built 1 dwelling per parcel, and it no longer applies. It has to revert back to the fire apparatus access road, which is the 20-foot standard.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, so now I think we do have someone from State Parks online to try to provide some clarification on the questions we had related to state parks. Is that person here?
Robert, this is Mickey from State Parks. I'm here.
Hey, Mickey, can you see the slide that's on the screen? Those were the 3 bullet points or the 3 questions we got last week that we're hoping you can provide some clarification on.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the first one is at what point does state parks review the request? Once it comes to us, we'll act on the request. I'm sure we're gonna have to send it to the AG's office because the legal process, it'll go to the AG first and then to State Parks Board after that. This is new to us. We haven't done one in 10 years. I haven't done one since I've been here. So that's the process. It'll come to us, the director will look at it, it'll go to the AG's office. They'll comment on it, it'll come back to us, and then we'll have a public meeting with the State Parks Board where they make their recommendations on whatever the request is from the city of Flagstaff. What other questions? What guidance may state parks offer? I will follow up and see if I can get an answer on what if we are able to move the easement without impacting the 10%. That's one of the questions I think that came out. That will be another legal question that we can pursue before that you make any decisions. We'd like to do that.
Commissioner White, you had a question?
Yes, yes, sir. I asked this earlier, maybe you were online when I heard it. It has to do with baseline, what defines baseline. Obviously, the easement that was in there is part of the baseline because it was in before the purchase and the conservation easement. However, improving that road without considering easement changes, but just changing the road from its dirt path, a small road, to a 20-foot wide driveway. Is that outside of the baseline or is that part of the baseline? Improvement of an existing right-of-way?
Improvements of this existing right away, I believe. I'd have to check with the AG's office. I would check with them, but I'm assuming any improvements on that right of way would have to meet the requirements, code requirements for the city of Flagstaff before they do it in construction. I mean, that would probably be the first question if it meets that.
But then, is that something that would be a discussion from the state parks point of view in terms of stating that baseline was what it was?
That again, that'll be a question for the AG's office.
Commissioner Norton?
Thank you. I had a question about the wildlife impact and if that becomes a consideration as it comes to you for evaluation of this development, whether it's the proposed or even the existing right of way. So since the initial right of way and even the purchase of the property by the city of Flagstaff, other things have come forward. It was mentioned about the goshawk nests, as well as we've received some documentation that the Arizona State Forestry Division of Flagstaff had identified that corner, which is a good half of the easement, as a high density wildlife corridor. Does that become any part of your consideration for anything?
Mr. Chair, I'm sure that would be part of the consideration, the impact on wildlife, the impact on the flora and fauna, the impact on, so the State Historic Preservation Office would also be involved with the impact in the property.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you.
So our next slide is to allow the property owners to come up. I think that I assume that's Cody. And he can talk about what their plans are up there and then answer any questions you all have. And I don't know if his engineer is here. He is. So they also have their engineer who designed the plans that is available for questions as well.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cody Routson. I'm one of the parcel owners. And yeah, we bought this parcel, my family and I, who are here. And I think everyone was going to come up and just express what our intentions are, but we're just hoping to build a home up there. And yeah, it's a beautiful place. And we're just really excited about being part of that community. We weren't like the nuances of the access. We were aware that it was nuanced, but we're appreciating that it's not more complicated than we had realized initially. Nonetheless, we're still very hopeful that we'll be able to build a home on this property, and if not, like we're looking toward the city or toward you all to provide us a off ramp or an alternative. If there's other creative solutions, but I feel like we've explored a lot of the different options as Kevin articulated in terms of potential access routes and widths. And I mean, there aren't very many options, and we feel like we've arrived at the best case scenario with at least with where we have the least impact on the open space. But yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions from you all. And my wife is here, as well as some other of the property owners. I think a few of the property owners are also on remotely, so I'd be happy to take any questions.
Commission, yeah. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you for coming today. I was wondering, you said this is sort of the last resort and the last place you've come to try to get access up to these properties, and you've tried all these other routes. I guess I'm just like, when you bought the property, were you told like, and the last resort should be this attempt because it's going to be really challenging, or did you think that, or were you informed that maybe all these other ways would work? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering like how you got, like, why didn't you start with trying, or why didn't all the property owners start with this direction?
Yeah, maybe I wasn't as clear. When we bought the property, we saw the existing easements. We read Arizona State property access law. It all seemed pretty straightforward that we could get access to our property through the open space. And so that's the path that we've been taking along the way. I think we've realized that it's a lot more nuanced, and we're open to alternative ideas. We've been exploring different options with the staff at city in terms of road position, road width. I'm also working with the engineer to figure out the path that makes the least impact in terms of following the existing disturbance, and then also exchanging a big section of that easement, moving the road onto our private property so we can give that back to open space in exchange for some of the impacts outside of the permanent road, kind of those cut and fill zones that were being discussed earlier. Did that answer your question?
Well, I mean, were you part of the original 2015 or this 8-year effort to try to deal with the road, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Hendricks is online. He's been involved the longest. We bought our parcel in 2021 or 2020. So Joe was looking at different options for this parcel, for all the parcels up there since I think 2005. For various reasons, he never was able to construct a road up there, and that wasn't because I just lost. Sorry, that wasn't because there was opposition to the road at that point. It was owned by the state at that point, and they were open to whatever options he needed. It's since 2013 when this turned into a conservation easement that it's become a lot more complicated.
Thank you. Chair, if I can ask, thank you, Chairman. And so I know you said a couple of people are on the call, like how, do you represent, I mean, are you able to speak for everybody? Like everybody, every single property owner there has agreed to maintain this road to these standards? And agrees that the way the access has been moved onto the private property, that those private property owners will also allow the other private property owners to have access from this driveway. Like, and even if these properties get sold and change hands, that they're like, that this is all gonna be, cohesive agreements within your community.
Yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a, like, coordinating all the members up there. I think there are 6 landowners and 7 parcels, and one kind of group that owns the other parcels. So it's basically 7 owners. But yes, we've been kind of working as a group to work these plans up with their engineer. They've all been splitting costs. We're, on board with, yeah, kind of, we're all working cohesively. I can't speak for everybody for every single issue for sure. And I think some of the owners are here and could certainly do that. Or, if there's specific questions that I can't speak to. But in terms of the proposal, the plans, we're all working cohesively.
Any other questions at this point?
I think some of the other owners, at least Alexis, was interested in speaking, so I'll let her come up now if that works okay.
Go.
Hello, thank you guys all for being here today. My name is Alexis Stack. I'm an owner with my husband of one of the smaller parcels, 2J, that are being discussed tonight. I'd just like to start off by saying I'm from Flagstaff. My family's actually been in Flagstaff since 1916. So if anybody, like, I actually met my husband in Spanish class at Coconino. So if anybody understands like what Flagstaff is, it's me. Like, believe me when I say that Flagstaff is my home in more than just a physical address. And I understand the importance of preserving it while also exercising my rights as a private property owner who purchased a parcel with an existing right-of-way easement. So that's essentially like why I'm here today. Is it was asked, like what our plans are. To be honest, like in comparison to what's already out in Hidden Hollow, what my husband and I are planning on building is going to be extremely modest. All we want to do is become future residents of Hidden Hollow and have the same rights that anyone else who's already built or is actually currently building down there has had the right to already do. We have spent the better part of a year working with Kevin and many of the city officials to come up with the best iteration of what's a mutually inclusive agreement for all of us. To kind of answer the question you had for Cody, Commissioner Thomas, is to kind of piggyback on that is when we purchased the land, we purchased it with an existing right-of-way easement. So all of this was kind of a surprise to us as we got involved in it. And it's like Cody said, I think the conservation easement made this slightly is an understatement, made this extremely complicated for all of us. At this point, what we're asking for is just for the legal description of the easement to reflect the existing alignment of the already long existing dirt road. If we aligned it with the current description as been shown in the map, the easement would cause new and greater impact on the undisturbed area, which we don't want. A road next to a road, like how silly is that? The adjustment in the legal description of the right-of-way is beneficial to the conservation easement overall, as it results in almost an acre back to the conservation easement while still respecting the rights of the private property owners up there. I'll reiterate what I said in the last meeting. We have worked very, very hard to be in a place to call ourselves future residents of Hidden Hollow. All we're asking for is what everyone who already owns a home there, who is currently building off of Hidden Hollow Road as we speak, has had the right to do as a private property owner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here, for your time.
Can you state your name, please?
Steven Stack, also owner of 2J. I feel silly now that everybody's come up before me. I have just kind of gonna beat it again with the same ideas I think that everybody else had. But I think the decision we're asking the commission to make here is to redefine the location of our easement. Holding us to the original location creates unnecessary disruption, which I think we all want to avoid. A road already exists from Hidden Hollow to our property, and we can make that existing dirt road fire code compliant, or we can build a road adjacent to that, which I think all seems a little silly if we can all work together to make this happen. Two roads starting and ending at the same location is what we're trying to avoid here. And if you can believe me, your city officials have held our feet to the fire to make this the best, smallest road that we can make. This is it. There's no way to get this smaller, to abide by code, to abide by law, and to protect that area as best we can. This is it, I promise you. It's been a lot of hardworking, smart people that have made that happen for us. So we appreciate their work, because that's our ultimate goal. Heard from several people suggest that we would be okay with the existing road there now, and we honestly would be. What the dirt road that gets us to our parcel, we would be fine driving up and building our home ourselves. Our 600 square foot houses is what we have intended up there on ours. And I can't speak for anybody else, because there's 6 others, but that's our intention. That's what we're gonna do. And that's what we're asking for. So I believe the right thing to do is to honor the original agreement and allow this right of way while causing the least amount of impact to the area. The commission is the responsible stewards of this land, and to require any more disruption of it is not protecting it. It's wasteful and stubborn on both our behalves to ask or to do that. So relocating the easement, I believe, is a win-win, and that's what we're asking for. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, the owners? Parcel, okay.
Yeah, one more owner here. My name is Claire. I'm Cody's wife. This is Casper, my sidekick. And I just want to second everything that they said, but also add like one other more personal element, which is that we are environmentalists. Cody's a climate scientist at NAU. I'm a water resources specialist. We have 3 kids that we want to leave a better world for, and we want them to grow up in the natural world. Like the appeal to us of being up there is for them to grow up hiking and biking and appreciating the wild, so that they can become future conservationists. And so all of the things that we can do to minimize the impact, we see that as our best interest. The wildlife, the plants, the water, like we care really deeply about those things, and that's why we want to be there. So that's all.
Thank you.
I think that's it from the private property owners. So next.
Did you have any other?
Me? Yeah, I want to add a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm not going to get too far out of line here. But yeah, I think one thing, like I said before, we didn't put on the screen was some of the conditions we already talked about with the property owners. And I want to make sure we're clear on those, just so that if people have comments or questions, I can try to answer them ahead of time. So we talked about the road maintenance and the clearing or the snow and snow maintenance, snow removal on the road. They understand that need. That would be built into, and when we talk about this, it would be built into either the easement itself or some other separate document. I think that'd be preferable, because you want to be able to enforce it against an HOA of some kind. And so we've talked about them creating an HOA. They're up for that. They have no problem doing that. We talked about a walking path adjacent to the road, basically allowing pedestrian and bike access. The property owners were perfectly fine with that. Talked about potentially making it private access. I think we need to have some internal discussions about that. But like I said before, it's currently the easement is right of way. And when people hear right of way, they think of a large public road. So this, like we said, we were talking about more of a driveway. But then we also talked about potentially even trying to limit other use. So members of the public aren't using that road for, to get back deeper into the mesa and getting back to hiking trails. And so we talked about making, when we revise the easement, if it's approved, would be to, instead of calling it a right-of-way easement of any kind, calling it more of like a private access easement. And then sign it appropriately and trying to prevent a lot of traffic going back there. Because I don't think the property owners want that, and I don't think the public wants that. At least we've talked about that internally, and I think that'd be Robert's preference. We talked about invasive weeds and control of invasive weeds because you're disturbing the ground and that can lead to that. They understand the need to treat any invasive weed issues during the construction, after the construction. We talked about the limitation on lot splits and subdividing. And then we also talked a little bit about, and I'll go back on the screen. One thing we noticed when we were looking at the map is the two southern parcels there don't look to be thinned. So that was another request we made, and the owners of those two parcels, which I don't think is anyone who spoke today, but Cody did speak to the owners of those parcels, and they were open to allowing the thinning of those parcels. They're not going to do it themselves, but they would allow the city, if we had grant dollars or some other way of thinning those parcels, they would be open to that, which I think is important to the city and to the surrounding community to thin those two parcels out. I think that covers most of what we talked about, maybe some other minor things, but I share that again. So in case we have any questions out there, but also to show that I hate to say we put their feet to the fire, but we did ask a lot. And I think the property owners were very receptive to most of the requests. And I appreciate the comment about them being environmentalists as well. I think we've seen that through this process.
Thank you. Commissioner White?
Yes, on the right, Kevin, on the right of way, the portion between Hidden Hollow Road and the boundary of the Mesa Natural Area. Yes, a couple 100 feet, maybe 300 feet. Has that got the same privileges, history, and everything else that the rest of the right of way has?
So we got that question last time, and we did ask that is a separate easement across that private property. It's not part of the BLE easement, but it does provide access down there. I don't know if we have Bryce online. I think he's our real estate manager who looked at that easement. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know what rights they have, but I know it provides access there. But it's not part of the BLE easement that these property owners have the rights to.
And there's a history to it. It's been moved because of the property owner back in the 90s and so on. And there's now a gate at Hidden Hollow and a gate at the boundary of the open space. And so there's a little thing that just raises questions in my mind whether that might affect access by the public to the observatory natural area.
Yeah, we can look into that. I think the property owner was here. Yeah, okay, I've just whispered it's in the county, but I think the property owner was actually here last time. I don't know the history you're talking about of it being moved. We can definitely look into that a little bit more and see if there's any issues that would arise from that parcel. But I know our real estate manager looked at it and he didn't raise any of those issues with our group. He didn't call out anything specifically. So I guess I assume that it provided the access that would be needed for these property owners.
So I think that would be very important.
We'll look at that. We'll dig a little deeper into it.
So from that, I would assume that this fire road starts where the observatory Mesa property starts and would not include that property that's to the north.
That's correct. Yeah, because they wouldn't have any rights to construct on that.
Would that be a problem for the fire department?
That is a good question for Chris Jack if he is on. I don't know if we still have Chris.
Yeah, I'm here. So I would have to look at the distance of that. If it's short enough, it wouldn't be a problem. I believed that it was going to be a full modification from Hidden Hollow all the way up. So I'd have to look at that little piece and see if that was not part of the modification. If not, if it would cause a problem. If it's less than 150 feet between there, it wouldn't cause a problem at all.
Thank you for that. Definitely something we should look into.
Chair Wilson, I also wanted to mention that we did receive an email from one of the other property owners, Amy Anderson. We did forward this email to you in advance, but if you'd like, I can read through that.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Great. She says, "Hi, my name is Amy Anderson. I'm one of the landowners of the 7 parcels on Observatory Mesa. Our parcel is 6 acres. I want to introduce myself as I may not be able to attend the next meeting, and I know that the request was one to know the intent of the landowners. I was born in Flagstaff and graduated from Coconino High School, attended NAU, and worked at the Flagstaff Medical Center as an RN. My husband, Troy, was also born there and graduated from Coconino High School. We are currently living in Maui, but Flagstaff will always be our home. Our hope is to build a private home on our land and retire there. We do not plan on subdividing. Thank you for helping us to get the driveway access easement approved. We are all good people with the same intent. We want to maintain as small a footprint as possible and safely access our land so that we can eventually build. Thank you."
Thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions? Commissioner Fox.
To follow on with the question about that Commissioner White brought up about that little northern tail, for lack of a better descriptor, on the connector to Hidden Hollow Road. I mentioned earlier, it was mentioned earlier that there are 2 gates, one at Hidden Hollow Road and then one at the Observatory Mesa boundary line. And I think it'd be worthwhile to determine the status of those and how that relates to access to the area, both for the landowners and for any emergency vehicles.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. And I'm looking for the email from Bryce and some information. If I can find that, I'll share it with it before this meeting is over.
Thank you.
Commissioner Norton.
So I just wanted to say, as I've noted on my notes here, so we've heard from 3 property owners, and they are the owners of the 3 smallest properties. Do we not have any further input from anybody else on some of those larger parcels? It would be great to have heard from them, or at least had an introduction, but just wanted to see if there was anybody out there.
Yeah, Joe. Yeah, I know Joe's online and he's with someone else who may be another property owner. Joe, are you? I hope his name's Joe. Are you still online with us?
I think I'm online. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, terrific. Yeah. So we're the 38 acres on the northern portion of the area being discussed. And I'm actually sitting here next to Michael Ben Horan, who has the 20 acres in the middle section to the east. Just to be abundantly clear, we're completely behind and cohesive with what Cody said earlier. I think he did a great job, as did the Stacks, of explaining what's going on out there and what our intents are. The property, as I think Alex explained, is zoned rural residential 5. And this goes back actually longer than was stated earlier. This goes back almost 20 years when I started getting involved with it. And no one has any intention of developing this property as commercial or otherwise anything other than residential, quite frankly. It would be completely cost prohibitive to do any kind of a major development up there. We're above the city water service elevation line, which in their development standards clearly states there would have to be basically a 1 million-gallon tank to serve that property. So that'll, quite frankly, it's just not going to happen. And yeah, we've been at this for a long time. We originally were dealing with the state land department when it owned the property. A woman named Gloria Nichols, who had zero issues with us moving the existing right-of-way and easement to accommodate whatever the city of Flagstaff needed for construction and emergency services purposes. At some point in the game, obviously, land ownership changed hands to the city of Flagstaff. And that's generally speaking, when all the property owners were able to get together and agree on effectively a cost-sharing agreement on this driveway. It wasn't until recently. And that's sort of what took so long. It wasn't that we didn't have rights, and it wasn't that we didn't have the ability to get this done. It was just some of the property owners up there just didn't want to share in the cost, and that stopped the project from taking place. So all the landowners up there, and I've spoken to each and every one of them, they're all aligned. It's all cohesive. We're planning on acting as a group. We're planning on staying residential. And I mean, I get the concerns involved, and I'm respectful of that. But we also have a right to access our property. And when we say we've explored every option, we truly have explored every option to simply access our property. And what sort of drives the bus here is if we have to stay within the city of Flagstaff's emergency services vehicle standards, which I believe is, I think, either 100 or 150 foot minimum radius and a 10% grade, this is the road that has to happen. And we have every intention of minimizing the impact. It's in our best interest. It's in the city of Flagstaff's best interest. Just to pivot real quick, that small section that's in the county that links Hidden Hollow with the city of Flagstaff, where our road begins, that is in the county. It's fairly short. I want to say it's maybe a couple 100 feet. And there was a history behind that. There was actually an individual some 20, 25, 30 years ago that blocked off the access to that property. And it was a fairly extensive negotiation back and forth, and I think a lawsuit between state land department and that landowner to move the right of way to the west. And what came out of that, what was the product of that was, I think, 65 or 6 feet wide right of way that is currently existing today. It's on flat ground. There's no grade to it. And the two gates that you mentioned, the two grain gates, were put up by a former property owner. Last name was Sisk. And it was her attempt to sort of keep us from accessing the property. I want to say that was put up probably 2009, 2010. She didn't put a padlock on it, but she put the gates up on it. So she couldn't prevent access, but she did want to deter it. Nobody had an issue with it because especially during fire season, it kept tourists and recreational vehicles. They thought maybe it was private, so they didn't open the gate. But all the landowners have been opening those gates and closing those gates simply because they don't have a home up there. And, obviously in the wintertime that wouldn't work. But when there would be a home up there, those gates would have to go away. So there's the legal access is there. It has been. There's no topography issues. There's no drainage issues. And the easement itself, the right of way there, is actually wider there than anywhere else that we have during the rest of the alignment. And Mike and I, like I said, I'm sitting with Michael Ben Horn right now. We're happy to take questions, but that's the kind of nuts and bolts of it. And I think Cody did a great job of explaining where we're at, how we got here, and where we'd like to go.
Would you mind stating your name again for the public record?
Yeah, my name is Joe Hendricks.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you guys want to hear from me. My name is Michael Ben Horan. I'm sitting here with Joe, and I am the owner. My wife and we are the owners of parcel, I believe it's 002H. And we've owned it for some time now. And when we bought it, it was, of course, we bought it, on our title report, it had, right of way. We wouldn't have bought it if there was no access to it. And we bought it subject to knowing that there was a right of way across both the Sisk's land or an easement across the Sisk land and a state land right of way to the property. And actually, I carried it all the way. Our intent was, we had 2 young children at the time, and we were going to build a cabin on the entire 8 or 19 acres, whatever it was. And I actually took it all the way through. I wish I could remember the names of the city engineer and planner. Do you remember his name? I actually bumped into his wife's car at the camp.
Oh, that's great.
Gunders. Well, anyway, I took it all the way. Actually, I was going to we actually got to the point of a grading permit. The city had no problem with it. And like Joe mentioned, the state land just referred to the road. She said, no problem. I know it isn't exactly within the easement, but obviously the least damaging course of action would be to use the road that's already there. And once the road is improved, we will revise the right of way. And the term was as built. Anyway, that in the end, it fell apart because there was one owner who did not want to share in the cost of the road and was particularly sensitive about joining the road maintenance agreement, which I know all of us current owners are good with. So I never did pull the grading permit, and we just waited. And anyway, then I guess the rest is history. The state or Flagstaff bought the state land, and we've just been waiting. And that's it.
I think that covers it.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Any questions from the commission for Joe or Michael? Nope. Don't see any. So proceed.
So it looks like we have, Chris Jack has his hand up, if you want to call on Chris.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the gates. So even if there is a gate and the property owners want to keep that road private and lock that gate, we will allow that as long as we have access through it. And that's through a Knox padlock. So we have keys to Knox boxes for commercial buildings. Padlocks can also work on our key. So as long as we have access, there is nothing that would not allow us to permit a gate. So the gate doesn't really cause a problem from our side. And then hearing that, just to add, hearing that the easement from Hidden Hollow up to that little section there on the north end, if it's got a 66-foot easement, I believe it would be fine to modify within that easement to meet code. I don't know. Maybe Kevin can kind of answer that, as long as the modification lands within their easement. I don't know if there's any problem with that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the easement now and I'm reading it very fast, but I can't imagine this being an issue with providing access back there. In the easement, they mentioned the access for the private property owners, the owners that have to cross section 6 to get to their private land, and talk about the realignment and with respect to those private property owners. So they were definitely part of the discussion when this easement, and it looks like it's been revised multiple times. So I'm trying to go back really quick in history here, but it looks like the most recent version is the one talking about the realignment, and it mentions the private property owners back there. So I don't think there would be any sort of issue. We probably just have to work with that property owner and with the private property owners to figure out first whether any improvements need to be made, and if they do, how the property owners effectuate that on that easement.
Thank you. So any more, any presentations, other property owners, or any specific questions from the commission to discuss what we've seen and heard tonight? No. I do have a couple of questions. I'd give everybody else an opportunity to speak, but I do have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure who wants to answer. But About tree cutting, is there any removal going to be necessary to realign the easement? I know there's a minimum requirement of height for access to the fire apparatus, but also on top of that, any timber going to be taken if the easement was approved and changed.
So the plans don't identify trees, so but I will tell you, I think the answer to that's yes. I think there would have definitely be some tree removal. In fact, the BLE easement talks about that. It talks about the removal of trees and I think compensating the state for the cost of those trees. So we can discuss that, whether to keep something like that in there, whether it's necessary or at least, I mean, we'll definitely be talking about minimizing the impact to flora and any trees that are up there, but any that do need to be cut down, we can talk about what's the best use of those trees and, you know.
So all of those requirements in the original right of way would follow with this one as well.
I think that's
And a
my
discussion
thought.
ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that's my thought is something it'd be the same or something similar unless there was some discussion with the property owners. If there's something that doesn't make sense, I wouldn't want to keep it. But yeah, I think everything, I wouldn't start deleting anything in that right of way without council or, you know, commission approval of that.
Commissioner Thomas?
It says in the ASLD easement that the state has to be compensated for removal of trees. That wouldn't need to be applied with this new easement. Like the city of Flagstaff doesn't have to be paid for them. That's a statute that state land has to try to deal with all the time, but I doubt the city of Flagstaff does.
That was my thought. Again, I think that's something we'll definitely be, when we finalize this with council or when council's considering it and we actually put a revised easement in front of them, I think that would probably be one that I would look to reconsider whether it's necessary. But I guess to answer your question, because that's in there, I assume there's definitely some trees that are going to be cut down. Yeah.
And another question that I have, and this might be for the engineer. On the document of the map of what's going to happen, it states that the information shown here on is based on an aerial survey that was done in 2006. How confident, was there a physical survey done? Or is this based strictly on the aerial survey that was done 17 years ago? And are we confident that that's the accuracy of the, you know, the right of way proposed?
Joe, is that a question you can answer? Or, oh, hey, Rob's here. There we go.
Rob Begley with Mogan Engineering. We did not physically go out and topo to get the contours. Basically, we did an aerial survey. We feel confident. It has been checked with vertically with panel points, fairly common. And then the properties, we've surveyed a bunch of the parcels, the property owners here. So it's all where it's shown.
Just curious when I saw that, you know, how this was actually
And I
done.
Yep, and I don't think anything's changed since we started it with Joe 05, something like that, long time ago.
Sorry, yeah, let me chime in. Yeah, you're right, Rob. It was around 2005. I think Cooper Ariel did that, and then you and I and Kent Hotzenpeller walked the forest and did stakes for 3.5 days to create that. So the answer is, I mean, I can't speak to it as a surveyor, but I can certainly speak to it. Yes, it's accurate, and we did walk every section corner of that property. So yeah, I feel very confident that that accurately reflects what's going on up there in terms of topography and locations.
Right, and all of your legal descriptions are existing for the existing easement, proposed easements are based on, you know, field, the boundary is all, you know, shot in.
Okay. Another question, just in general, is an as-built provided at the end of the construction? We see what's proposed, but I'm sure that there'll be some, there's always changes or run into unexpected things.
Typically on a driveway, no, for single family residence. In this case, I would imagine that one would be done and be required by the city of Flagstaff. You know, this one has a lot more, it's more complicated than just a standard driveway, more
Right.
than 50 cubic yards. It's not 20 feet or 100 feet. So and with that grading permit, that would be required to move this kind of dirt, I'm sure that you would need a as-built survey.
Thank you. Kevin?
I'm kind of guessing where you're going here a little bit, but we did have a discussion this past week when we were preparing for this conversation. And we had some similar, I think Michelle McNulty, our planning director, raised it. And that was, you know, we have preliminary plans here. And so we were talking about process and in talking about process, we came up with the idea, and again, this isn't set in stone. This is the first time we're doing it. This is always subject to change. But she raised the same concern about, you know, when this goes to council with the preliminary plan, could it change? And the question the councils may have, similar to yours, is this what it's going to look like final? And then the question for the engineer, the answer from the engineer may be, man, maybe it may change a little bit. And I think the property owners have been hesitant to go to final plans because those are costly to really, you know, get that final plan. And they want to hear what the council is even, if they're even willing to consider amending this easement. So when we talked about process, we thought after it goes to the Open Space Commission, we would take it to council as a work session item where it would be discussed. Council can then give direction on whether they feel it makes sense to move forward with putting this through. I call it final plans. It's not, don't trust my terminology, but the idea is that this has basically been at concept with our planning group. So that's a very high level review by Alex's team and Michelle's team for this type of plan. Normally, we wouldn't look at this as we're talking here, as the engineer is saying, it's a driveway. This usually wouldn't come to council. It would be pretty simple, but this one's obviously different. So our planning group is definitely going to want to look at it. They're going to want to look at it, you know, not only to make sure it meets all of our code requirements, but actually get that final plan and know where the temporary easements need to be. That's the red area. We've got some drainage issues that our stormwater team may want to look at. So the idea was take it to council, see if they're even willing to consider this revised easement. If they give direction to continue, then it would probably go through our planning group to become more finalized, working with the engineer before any easement is agreed to. And then it would come back to council for that final, you know, we approve this revised easement now that it's gone through our planning group, it's gone through our stormwater group. The engineer has taken the preliminary stamp off it and said, yeah, this is what it's going to be. And then that was when we would ask for that final approval of a revised easement. And then after that, or in between there, I think we'd be going to state parks, because they're definitely in the mix too. But I think that's, if you're asking those types of questions, staff's been thinking about the same thing, and we're going to try to figure out a process so we don't get too far ahead on the preliminary plans.
Thank you.
And having said that they're preliminary, these are very detailed roadwise. I mean, we tried to kind of you know, put this whole thing into 5 sheets when truly it's going to be a 30-sheet plan set. The data's there. It's good data. I did want to just bring up one thing that Kevin had talked about earlier, in that, and I've seen it in emails here over the last 6 months. Physically, you cannot put the roadway geometry in the existing easement. The existing easement has angle points. Having and I believe it's 50-foot minimum curve radiuses, and a lot of these are 100, just to follow the contours. Like this, geometrically, you cannot fit the curves required by the fire safety into these angle point existing easements. So, you know, if you were to try to put it in at each of those corner angle points, so the green lines, you would be outside of that easement. So that was a big one. The, did everybody understand why we cut across, or we came around the edge on following the contour? Or we're not following the blue line? Right there. Did everybody kind of understand that? So we could hire you as an engineer. That, and there's a good example of where, curbs just simply don't fit inside the green line. So yeah, and that alignment there, basically, that's the least amount of disturbance. Whether you're trying to follow the other one or this, the one shown there is the least amount of disturbance. Questions?
Commissioner White?
Yeah, this isn't particularly relevant to my decision making, but you mentioned 2005 and so on. And when I looked at the APN for the property owners, all purchases happened between 2009 and 2021. So we're dealing with before in 2005, who were you dealing with?
Joe, if you're on there, I honestly lost track of time. I'm not sure what year he bought. Joe bought the original parcel, or the portion he did. We worked for Joe, and I thought it was 05.
And it was just for information. It doesn't affect.
It's been a long haul.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you.
All right, so I think now we're at, you can take public, I think it's public comment at this point.
Okay, you have some speaker cards here. First one on the top of the pile is Steve Ruff.
Hi, can you hear me? Excellent. Okay, my name is Steve Ruff, RUFF, and my wife and I have lived in Hidden Hollow since 2004. This has all been very interesting to see the way y'all work this thing, but nobody's said a word about how this might affect anybody that actually still lives in Hidden Hollow. Do any of you guys live in Hidden Hollow? No? Okay, well, okay. So our point of view, and I say our, my wife's and mine, is the additional traffic through Hidden Hollow neighborhood is unwanted and will cause problems for the existing residents. The planned development of the new residential property within the city limits of Flagstaff will expand over time, turn into another subdivision neighborhood or something resembling it. Whatever impediments regarding zoning will be swept away because there is too much money to be made. Therefore, an initial population, which is small, will expand into a much larger population. This will stress Hidden Hollow Road and all of the current residents north and west of the access point to the new subdivision, or whatever you want to call it. What city services will be brought into the new residential area? Will there be city water, natural gas, electricity? Will these services be cut through to, where will they be cut through to the new residents? Will the services be brought through the Linwood neighborhood? Guys at Linwood might not like that. It is a closer approach though. Water hauling services and propane are available if they can get to the new neighborhood. I haul water and have people deliver propane. In the winter, it can be a problem. Hidden Hollow Road is well maintained by the county. Snow is removed and the surface is graded several times a year, sometimes with the addition of material. The slope and grade is mostly passable, although there are several areas that can cause issues in the winter. There's an S-turn just beyond the mailboxes, which are near Highway 180. This S-turn becomes a hazard in the winter. Individuals leaving Hidden Hollow often end up in the ditch because they're driving too fast. Residents know this turn well and slow down. There's also poor visibility in this turn. This can lead to a compounding of the accident and block the exit from the neighborhood. There's no other way out but through this S-turn. The new residents of the city should should they leave the city limits through Hidden Hollow, are going to exacerbate these difficulties through their increased numbers. Another issue is that the traffic on Highway 180 becomes bumper to bumper in the winter as you go into Flagstaff. This means that any driver wishing to go into town in the afternoon when people from the Snow Bowl are also returning to town will be faced with a problem. Cars are stopped or moving very slowly. This traffic jam must then navigate in one lane past Sechrist Elementary School. Additional cars exiting Hidden Hollow Road will add to the confusion. It is difficult to get into the traffic stream. Will a traffic control device be placed at Highway 180 and Hidden Hollow Road? This burden would be placed on the county. The new road connecting Hidden Hollow Road to the new residential city property is going to require a great deal of improvement and maintenance. Who is going to do this work? Is the city of Flagstaff? Will they maintain it? And how much will it cost? I've heard estimates from builders ranging from $200,000 to in excess of $1 million. Will the new residents be required to pick up this cost? It seems like much of this cost could be avoided if the road were to connect to North Fremont Boulevard just west of Kramer Street. That's down in Cheshire. An additional benefit is that there's a traffic control device at Fremont and Highway 180. Are there any county representatives involved in this project? It appears that the city is placing a burden on county residents, i.e. the people that live in Hidden Hollow, when they could keep the entire enterprise within city boundaries. If there are county officials involved, we'd love to hear from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Mike Furr.
Thank you. I'm Mike Furr. I do, excuse me. I do live on Hidden Hollow, and I apologize if I'm repeating anything that's already been covered. The engineering has obviously done their paperwork on their due diligence as far as the roadway, the right of way. The maps are fantastic. And I totally understand the homeowner's point of view. This is their property. They want to build on it. We understand that. Steve mentioned a few items that are a concern of mine as well. No one has talked about hard costs. There's a number out there. They're estimating what the cost might be. I think they're probably 2 to 3 times as much as they're showing for the cost of the road. There needs to be a greater collaboration between the private property and the city and the county. This is a huge undertaking. It's not just building a small house on a piece of property on the top of the mesa. There's a lot more involved. We want long-term costs, or at least I don't want it, but the homeowners should realize, and the HOA should realize long-term costs of taking care of the road. Nobody has mentioned dark skies. Is there any notification of the dark skies folks regarding building homes right adjacent to the open space? I know for a fact APS does require major site plans prior to providing any power, kilowatts, whatever the case may be, for the parcels. No one has said, is that coming from another location that you probably already have researched it, or is it coming from Hidden Hollow Road all the way up and turning this into a right-of-way power, public right-of-way for the power? What is a contingency plan if the private property owners run out of money and they claim bankruptcy? Heaven forbid, these folks have a huge amount of money invested. This is for some, a huge amount of savings that is put into this property. And the open space strategic plan 2023, it does say that key partners, and I apologize if I'm not aware of all the people that put this together prior to us being notified. But it's to invite key partners, including Coconino Forest Service, county open space, and others that share that relevant information. one of the things that you have briefly talked about is, and the homeowner is here, is Dave Cheney. All this is going to go through his property. And he will or may have animals on the property. And I think it's his right as a private property owner to do what he wants to do on his property. This easement through his property is fine. The gates allow his animals to stay within this area. Nothing's been addressed regarding his private property. We're talking roadway costs, homeowners building on the mesa. All this funnels through this gentleman's property back here. He knew nothing about this, no notification, and until 3 days before the last meeting. And so I think it's Open Space's commission and the city's responsibility to notify all people that this impacts. I can't see that there's an urgency other than the money that's already been spent by the landowners to get this thing going. Are we calling it a public right of way? Is it a private driveway? There's terminology that's kind of loosely spelled out, and I apologize if I don't have all the terminology as it should be. I understood from the last meeting that the homeowners don't want all this road work. They want to be able to build on their property, and but I understand also the city is putting these requirements for public access for fire equipment, things like that. Is there any feedback from anybody about doing this off grid? We talked about, somebody mentioned sprinkler systems on the homes, like on West Ridge. They all have sprinklered homes. Fire department can't get to all those houses in a fast amount of time, so they're sprinklered. There's just a lot of costs that are just kind of talked about. There's a lot of issues that are affecting us as neighbors. We welcome new neighbors. We welcome people to build whatever size house. And I guess
Sorry,
that's my
that's your
time.
5 minutes. Thank you. The next card I have is David Cheney.
Good evening. I'm Dave Cheney. I'm the owner of the Little Tail, as we called it, so thank you for recognizing that. I'm going to try to talk fast because I don't want that buzzer to go off. That was loud. So Mike did a great job of representing me and the rest of the neighbors, so he covered a lot of the points. I have to tell you guys, I thought I was in the most complex business in Flagstaff, but what is on your shoulders is way more complex. So I've tried to simplify this for me. That this is a tough one. You guys have oversight over the land in the conservatory to make sure that it is well maintained. At the same time, the property owners, when they bought it, they have a right-of-way easement that goes to their property. It's up to you to decide whether you approve a variation to the existing right-of-way. I've heard, well, it's way more efficient. But I haven't seen any study that backs that up. In fact, I haven't seen any feasibility studies. And if they're out there, please send them to me. To me, that's the role of the commission, is to make sure that the ecosystem, the landowners, all the studies happen before you make this decision. As Mike said, I found out about this 3 days before, so I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it. But it definitely affects my property. I heard, why have two roads? Well, the one road is actually not really a road. It's a walkway for people to walk, for people to ride their horses. If you replace it with a driveway, where are those people going to access this land? So my request for you is get more information, please. I don't think we have enough information. Again, last time in front of this council, I invited Cody, I invited the city to contact me so we could have discussions. No one's called me. No one's reached out to me. I sense that there's no desire to collaborate on this whatsoever. So please just make the right decision as best you can. But for me, the property owners, they have an easement, they have a right to their property. You do not have an obligation to grant that. They could just use the existing easement. That's what they agreed to when they bought the property. And the only other one Mike brought up is I'm really unclear on the cost of the project. But like Mike, there should be some sort of performance bond because I'm worried that what's going to happen is you're going to get this project half complete and you're going to have quite a mess on your hands. So requiring a performance bond at least ensures that the project will be completed and it won't disturb the rest of the conservatory. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Duffy Westheimer?
Commission again. My name's Duffy Westheimer. My question is not specifically about the easement, but it affects the easement in the long run. These owners change, and so I think the zoning code is really critical in what is allowed because sometimes things happen and then they change it. So my question is, are accessory dwelling units allowed by right in rural residential? Is that included in the properties, dwelling count? And is it possible to put in a lovely little multi-tiny home commercial resort on rural residential? Because boy, that would be a great location for one. But that would also mean a lot of traffic on that driveway road, whatever it is. So my questions have to do with what's allowed by right, and if those things happen, what would that mean in the future? Would it mean that maybe the zoning was changed to accommodate more of that? So it's not about necessarily the owners right now. It's about what could happen in the future and what's allowed by right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we address that question?
So under current zoning code, every single family house on a piece of property is allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit, is not counted as a second unit. So anyone who built a house up there could also build an accessory dwelling unit. There are restrictions on those ADUs as far as size, number of occupants, sort of the rental structure, if you're living on site versus if you're renting these units. So as far as a tiny home, that would be considered a multifamily development. There are completely different zoning code requirements for multifamily, and it would trigger the need for a lot more public improvements, which again brings us back to that issue of how do you get water? How do you get a public street? Things like that.
So question, so an accessory dwelling unit would be permitted, but a tiny home would not, based on what is, what we're looking at today.
I believe Duffy's question was about a tiny home community. So when I hear that, I'm thinking of 3 or more units, which then triggers multifamily. tiny homes are kind of a tricky thing because everyone has their kind of own definition of them. Like, are we talking about trailers? Are we talking about RVs? Are we, it can be a tricky question to answer. But if we're talking about a site-built small unit, that would still be considered multifamily.
Okay, thank you. And the last speaker card I have is Charlie Silver. And after the last public comment, I would like to suggest that and we'll do online as well. But after the last public comment, I would like to take a 5-minute break.
All right, good evening, commissioners. Excuse if I don't get the terminology quite right with the percentages, but I hope you'll get the spirit of my question here. And that is, would the widening of this easement, of the existing easement, factor or eat into the 10% allowable improvements for this parcel of the Observatory Mesa Natural Area? Somewhere along the way here, I think I was hearing there was some allowable development. Again, if this widening would eat into that allowable percentage. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have some.
I can address that
online-
question
Yeah,
if you'd like.
go ahead.
Yes, so the answer I believe to that question is likely it would, but we are waiting for additional clarification from the Arizona State Parks as well.
Thank you. Going to take the person online who's been waiting patiently.
Karen Kennedy.
Karen, you're on mute.
Yeah, so I don't have a card. I have a number of questions. They don't really require answers. I just will ask the questions. The length of the road that connects the parcel, I believe it's either K or on another map it looks like J, that connects the parcel to the ROW. What is that length of road? Distance, feet? So where the yellow line goes into, I guess it is J. On the assessor's website, it doesn't look like that line meets J. It looks like there's some gap between them. So I'm wondering about that. Okay, that's a question. The other one is on the assessor's website, there's a longitudinal narrow strip all along J, K, and L. So it touches the south west corner of H, and it touches the northwest corner of F. And I'm wondering what that is. And then the next question or the next, yeah, so those are my kind of map questions. I don't know if anyone has a quick answer. And if you don't, let's just go on. And I also just would say that I have a lot of empathy for the people who have purchased these properties, especially those people who identify themselves as being very concerned about ecological issues. And when I hear mitigation, what I've seen in my, ever since I started working on invasive non-native invasive plant issues, which was in the late 90s, I've seen that disturbance, no matter what, does bring in invasive weeds, often some of the very serious ones. And I'm wondering, you know, like if there were an HOA that had in their charter or their CCNRs some kind of initiative where people who live there would work with, say, a group of Flagstaff invasive weed enthusiasts to kind of help. I know I work on removing invasive weeds from the Observatory Mesa property, or it might be Lowell's. I'm not sure where they meet, but it's wherever you see disturbance, where there has been construction vehicles or other types of soil rock deposits that have been placed on the land. So I'm concerned about that. And also like feeding wildlife, like some HOA restrictions on that kind of thing would mean a lot to me. And other than that, let's see. And I think that's, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Karen a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
Karen, can you see on the screen, I put up the Coconino County parcel viewer. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So is that little strip along the left, the side of those three parcels, that's a strip you were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that does pop up on the parcel viewer. You can't click on it. I mean, we've been trying, Robert said he's tried to access that to see if there's some sort of ownership. I don't know what that refers to. Joe may know an answer. We can look into that and see what that's trying to represent. But we did notice that, but we haven't been able to find any information on it.
I've seen that also other places, and usually it's some kind of easement, like access easement. But I can't say that as I'm not a county person. And also that map that you have on there, see how that line, I guess it's the ROW, kind of fades out before it gets to parcel J. That's what I'm asking about. Is there, it looks like there's a gap there between the ROW and the parcels. And so that's what I was wondering about. How long is it? I guess it's not very long because you can kind of tell by the size of the parcel. So
yeah, I wouldn't trust that the parcel viewer and how that easement is marked on there from the planning documents that we've seen. It runs right up to the border of that parcel. That strip may actually be that right of way that used to run down. If you remember, the current right of way actually runs down those three parcels to provide access. That actually may be what that's representing. That's my best guess, but we can look into that a little bit more and try to get a better answer from the county.
Okay. And when people are referring to that parcel to the piece to the north, are they talking about the piece that's directly above H? Or are they talking about where the corner of H hits the like the, I guess, Garrett Road or Garrett something? In other words, are they talking about a piece that actually looks like it's part of Fremont? I just never understood. Yeah, so that, see where it says 2801, and people talk about the piece to the north. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know either. That was public comment, but there is a piece to the north and it's on the southeast part of that 40-acre parcel, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so I was wondering, like, who owns it? Would they give access somehow to Fremont Boulevard, or how would that possibly work out? Anyway, don't require any answers to those questions.
You mind if I comment on that really quick?
Of course, yeah.
Go ahead. And Karen, are you done with all your questions?
Yes.
I'm sure the two of us can go back and forth for an hour on this stuff, but are you good with the questions you've already asked?
Yes.
Okay, so with respect to this parcel, I think this may have been what the public commenter was talking about. These parcels up here are privately owned. We definitely, during our discussions with the private property owners looking to amend this easement, we talked about that and asked them about gaining access across those parcels. I think my recollection is that there were some discussions maybe a while ago, but one thing I just want to point out for people watching and in the audience, you can see here, and we obviously don't have a topography map here, but this is a pretty steep ridge right here. Talked about potentially, why don't you just run, a road right through here to access your parcels, but you're going to deal with the same issues right here on this private parcel. So I can imagine why this private property owner isn't very keen on providing access, because it wouldn't be a straight line. You can't just take a road right up that ridge. You'd have to curve it around to meet those topography requirements. But we did ask about all that. The
Thank you.
answers we were given were that it just didn't work.
Okay, thank you. I have a 7 o'clock meeting, so I have to be rude and exit, but I really appreciate the time you've given me.
Is there anyone, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else online that would like to speak? Guess not. And I guess there was one more person in the audience, but you can state your name and.
Yeah, my name's Jack Moody. I live up off of Hidden Hollow Road. And I have a little bit of experience. I worked for a developer and I understand road building and home building. And I think everybody has really addressed the majority of things. So I don't want to go over all the things, but I want to hit some of the highlights that I think the city should be aware of. On Hidden Hollow Road, Steve mentioned that there's an S-turn. And I will tell you that that doesn't meet your fire department's, regulations for a turning radius. It just won't. It's too tight. So I don't know if that creates a problem for the fire department or not. The other thing, and it's probably the biggest concern that everybody has, is in '86 that right of way did get put together by the state. And there were a lot of requirements that went along with that right of way in order for it to become a legal right of way. It wasn't just like, here's the right of way, see what you can do with it. It was, here's a right of way, and the right of way can be put in place, but you have to follow the requirements of the right of way to do that. And then a road got built, and that road got built and it met none of the requirements of the right of way. At that point, the state could have just shut the right of way down and had it go away, or made the person that built the road for the property do it right. That didn't happen. If that would have happened, none of us would be here today because there would be no right of way. And then the city took over the right of way, and they literally had the same option. That they could have said, okay, we've had this right of way, but it's not built the way it should have been built. So the people have the opportunity to go in and do it right, which is what you're trying to do right now. You're trying to get it done the most affordable way for these individuals. And I think that's great. My biggest concern is that you're saying that these individuals, not only do they have to pay for the right of way, but they have to maintain it. And I'm not sure that all of them, and maybe they do, but I'm not sure that all of them realize what kind of costs they're going to run into. We're talking about 0.8 of a mile of road with a 20-foot wide road with 30 feet worth of disturbance and a lot of grading, a lot of structures, a lot of infrastructure going under the road for drainage. And I'm concerned that these people have good intentions of doing what they're planning on doing, but I'm afraid that when this gets further and further and further down the road, and then the reality hits that this road's going to cost, in the last meeting, somebody threw a number up of about $2,000. Well, that might pay for the engineering, but that's not going to pay for the road. So I really think that the new property owners really need to take a really hard look at their costs, not only the cost of the road, but their maintenance costs for the road, because that's not going to be a small number. It's going to be a very large number. And on top of that, the cost to develop those properties up there are going to be considerably higher than if they bought a 5-acre parcel, let's say, in Hidden Hollow. And they're going to be required to do things that they aren't required to do on some of these other parcels. And I really hope that they take the time to do the research to find out where their cost is really going to be and how much these homes are ultimately really going to cost them. Because I realize that that parcel up there is beautiful, but the reason those parcels were cheap was because of the cost it's going to take to develop them. And it's going to be very high. And I think if I was one of them, I would tie down my costs before I put too much more money into developing that road. Thank you.
Would you mind filling out a speaker card?
Sure, I didn't, you didn't have them last time, and so I
Yeah,
didn't.
and on the back table.
Okay, I get
Would
it.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And same thing. Have you?
Sure, I'll fill one out.
Okay, please. And
My name is Steve Ward. I've lived in Hidden Hollow for more than 20 years. And I just had a couple of quick points. One, we've heard a great deal of discussion about the intentions of the current landowners. And I wanted to stress that their good intentions really offer no guarantee or protection to the current Hidden Hollow residents. And by definition, with all this discussion, it's going to be an incredibly difficult and very expensive undertaking. And I think there's potential for failure. So with planning this, I think we have to plan for the event that there could be turnover in land ownership up there. And we could be dealing with a much more aggressive developer who's going to push the limits of what's going to be developed there. And I think for that reason, this should be planned accordingly. The current owners stress their ecological interest, which may not be the case if there is turnover. And I think there is significant risk for turnover. So I think we need to plan according to that. And I also would like to see studies done on Hidden Hollow Road, if Hidden Hollow Road can actually tolerate increased development, including the heavy excavation of building the road, the development of multiple houses, up to 23 houses. Also, now we're hearing with side houses also. And so the construction for that, all the utilities going up there, all the increased traffic on Hidden Hollow, which is already not equipped for the degree of traffic it has with the type turn and the steepness, particularly in winter, when we're also dealing with snow play and a large number of vacation rentals, which are all increasing the traffic. So those are my concerns regarding that as a Hidden Hollow resident. My other concern is right now, my family and I use the current road, which is not much more than a Jeep trail, to access Observatory Mesa, both hiking and biking. There's been some discussion tonight saying that perhaps the definition of that road is going to change and that would no longer be available to Hidden Hollow residents to access the Observatory Mesa. And you could say, well, we'll make an exception, but that doesn't seem fair to the rest of the Flagstaff community. So either you're going to allow residents to access Observatory Mesa or it's going to be closed. And I don't know if that's been really addressed. Thanks for your time.
thank you. Well, if that's the last of the public comments, I really would like to take a 5-minute break before we turn this into the commission discussion. So 5 minutes. Excuse me. We're starting the meeting again. All right, now we're done with the public comment. Is there any discussion amongst the commission members that we want to talk about before we move on? Commissioner-
Chairman, I mean, I know, I'm wondering if we're making a decision tonight, which I'm guessing we're not, but, and maybe we should save these things for later meetings so that we don't rush on, but I want to make sure that, you know, our responsibilities are to consider the open space, you know, like that's where our, those are our guardrails. And I think it's important that we stay in there. But I did think I really appreciated the comments from the public and from the landowners and from the community of Hidden Hollow. I think you all raised, you know, your positions, which as not a resident of the area or a home or a property owner, I wouldn't know. So I appreciated that. But I thought the point about the bond for the road, you know, I think that's something that we would talk about as the open space because we don't need an incomplete road on the observatory open space area. So, you know, that's something maybe we talk about in a future discussion, or is that a good thing to bring up now?
Kevin, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I turned around and asked Alex when that comment was made. I assume we would get a performance bond. Her answer was yes, we would. We would get it at civil plans. It's pretty common with any type of public improvement, like a road or anything like this. So I think we'd do it here as well. We would get a performance bond prior to construction.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think other things like that, as we learn more, will come up, but I just want to make sure we stay within the guardrails of the open space area.
Commissioner White?
Yes, thank you. Well said. I agree. Any decision or thought process on my part is how it affects the conservation easement, one way or the other. And all of the aspects of that easement, the ecology, the protection of canyons, the flow of animals from one place to another, and so on. I also agree with what you said that certainly sympathetic to Hidden Hollow residents, sympathetic to the landowners and their desires. But I wrote down several things that I think as we come up with some kind of recommendation, we should be, I think I would want to be aware of. And not in any particular order, but our decision would, if it, well, let's put it this way. If the easement change is supported by us, it will require major surface improvement. And that changes the existing, what I consider the right of way as it is now. It's actually, I see a conflict between what some of the landowners want and what I think it's there now, which would fit in with the easement that we have, with the conservation easement, and the city's requirement for the 20-foot wide and the 80,000 gross weight capacity. So that's one thing. I think a major surface improvement will change what is there now in a way that's not supportive of the conservation easement in some details, not in a major way. The road will require to be engineered to meet the specifications, and this is a little bit redundant, but it is a difference than what exists there. And just to add, for information, I was checking on costs. The observatory, Lowell Observatory, was required to put in exactly this type of road this year, a third of a mile on a very flat stretch. And I asked, and it cost, without the engineering, it cost $300,000 for a third of a mile. on a flat stretch of road um, on section 17 of the observatory's property. So that's just an information item for the landowners, and you maybe have already researched that, and you can multiply that by whatever to get your cost if it were a flat road. It is when developed, it will be easily usable road by all kinds of vehicles. There may be requirements on that, and I would suggest that if we make any recommendations to the city, if the road is improved to a certain level, that certain requirements be put on it as far as the uses is concerned, and the agreement. But it would be the only road on the Observatory Mesa natural area that enters in one boundary, the north boundary, and exits on the east boundary. And therefore, it is a road that actually would cut off approximately, if you just look at the map, about 30 or 40 acres. It would separate it. Now, does that make a difference? I think if it were a major improvement to the road, it would make some difference because it would attract a different amount of use than it is right now, and a different kind of use. So that would be a concern on my part as far as Open Space Commission is concerned. The Forest Service notes that the area is a significant wildlife corridor, that particular with the road crosses part of it. And that's in a document we just received today or yesterday, or maybe it was Friday. I would be really concerned with power if it were above ground. So again, if I were to make a recommendation, from my point of view, that the easement would be approved, that would be one of the requirements, that any utilities would have to be below ground and follow the easement rather than a new easement. Again, the bottom line for me is the different amount of traffic that would occur if this easement were granted, change of easement were granted, and a quote driveway was put in. So it'd be the amount of traffic, I think, that would be my major concern. So I would stop at that point.
Commissioner Norton?
Thank you. I'm struggling with this because, I feel like back in 1986, when it was state-owned land, that, maybe it was a poor right of way to be drawn at the time. Maybe not a lot of consideration was given to it. It was just, random state land at the time. And, here we are later where there's obviously a new conservation easement on it. There's been additional ecological and wildlife sensitivities that have been brought up that we've mentioned, about the high density wildlife corridor being there and other things like that. At the last meeting, one of the first questions I asked was, had all alternatives been exhausted? And, yes, we're hearing that they are. I still don't feel 100% convinced, I suppose, that there aren't other ways to get them access off the mesa. I wish that was further explored, or that I felt more confident in that. I really feel for the Hidden Hollow residents because this situation dumps into county land, dumps into their community. I'm disappointed that the initial response from the county has been that this doesn't trigger any kind of mitigation for their community and their road and their access. That concerns me. And if I suppose if those goes through and development starts, then, Hidden Hollow has to start attending county meetings, to get something done so that their road can handle this extra traffic, including the construction traffic and such. Um, I'm pleased to hear that really we're limited to 23 units up there, but the ADU issue could increase that significantly, as far as additional residents, short-term rentals. Who wouldn't want to have a short-term rental up there on the mesa, right next to a conservation area? Um, so those sort of things, concern me. I'm pleased about the performance bond, and that would be something to ensure that the Observatory Mesa open space doesn't get left with something that's incomplete. But as I look at the confines of what this commission is supposed to look at, which is the open space, obviously what we want is the least impactful result, that still honors the rights of the property owner because those rights were given to them before. So when I look at it that way, I think that I would begrudgingly have to support the realignment, although it doesn't make me happy that there's any road going through there, but that's beside the point. Um, and I am still interested in if open spaces as as a commission, department, if it would be a good thing to decommission and mitigate, restore the dirt road that doesn't get used as part of the realignment, to see if that's something that is a good thing or not. Um, and I guess those are my comments so far. Uh, so thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Wallen?
Okay, you know that I heard about all the concern, all the landowner. I really sympathize to you all because that's really gorgeous area and I want to be there too, but I really have to think, especially with our mission as Open Space Commission, we really have to maintain the natural beauty for everybody. And I heard about your point that you are really just pro environment and you also agree in terms of natural beauty and such. But when I heard Commissioner White mentioning about the have everything has to be really underground, we are not talking about that at all, right? Because we are just talking about the easement, talking about the road, not thinking about the infrastructures to go there at all. So I really concerned about the bond that if we approve it and such and have the road that's further, we have to go there in terms of infrastructure. And I really just don't want to open that door at all. And I know that the residents of Hidden Hollow right now, that's really just hauling the water. And I have it really just the propane tank and such. But is it going to be there all the time if this road open? And also with the traffic right now is already heavy, that the one that I see it, even though not improved at all. And I really wonder what will be if that really just in some ways widening it and more accessible and will destroy the ecology in that area. That's all. Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, I'd just like to say, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to raise my hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Commissioner Applin?
Yep. I see three versions of myself here on my screen. I don't know if I've got an echo or what's going on with that, but very quickly. So, excuse me. I brought this up last time and I just want to revisit it because I don't feel like I fully understand this yet. I've heard residents of Hidden Hollow say that they don't essentially want that road improved because of the impact to them, which I fully understand. I've heard the residents or the owners of the property say, we're fine with the road as it exists. If we could keep that road, that would be fine with us. The issue is the fire regulations require that it be improved. Is there a way, and I'll ask this again because I don't think we have an answer, that the requirements, wherever they are derived from, can be waived, can be potentially looked at, can be voluntarily waived by the residents if they agree to it? Is there another way around it with the purchasing of apparatus that could navigate that road that doesn't require the same amount of roadway infrastructure as a standard fire engine? Or is that absolutely not doable? Because to me, it seems if both the residents of Hidden Hollow don't want the road improved because of the impact and the property owners are okay with the road the way it exists, and there will be no changes to it substantially, which would probably ease the minds of this commission. The only thing in between that, us and that solution, are regulations for the fire department. Is that correct? Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I can comment on that. And if Chris Jack is still on, he can help me out here, but I think I've got this answer. Yeah, you're correct. The road improvements are being triggered by our fire code. It is a safety requirement. It's to allow our trucks to access it. Can we amend or waive? The simple answer is no. And Chris mentioned this in his comments earlier. He mentioned that we adopt a fire code, but the state fire marshal also adopts a fire code. And we can be more restrictive, but we can't waive. We can't be easy. What's the word? We can't ease those requirements. So can we waive them? Can we say, all parties agree? The answer to that is no. And it's for good reason. It's to allow our apparatus to get back there. It's to allow emergency vehicles to get back there. We ran into that. I'll just say we've seen this pop up in other areas where back in the 80s, 70s, we allowed developments to proceed even though they didn't follow all of our regulations. And I will just tell you, they're headaches. We have some areas right now that are still dirt roads that need access, and we need to make sure that they're accessible for our fire trucks, but they're very difficult because we allowed exceptions in the past. So I think that's not only from a fire perspective is that a no, but I think it's also bad idea from a planning perspective.
So when you say, you've said two things here that I'm confused. You said you allowed exceptions in the past, and you also said exceptions are not possible. So which is it?
Well,
Like, are they
exceptions were-
not
let me tell
possible
you-
and you just don't want to do them?
Exceptions were allowed in the 70s and 80s before I was here and before our current fire chief was here. They were bad ideas. I think when you look through paperwork of the city of Flagstaff, back in the day, some things were done that really weren't supposed to be done. So there's some examples of that. We don't do that anymore. We follow our codes. We don't make those type of exceptions, and we wouldn't do that here. And I know the fire chief's on. If you want him to repeat what I just said, I'm sure he will, but I will tell you.
No,
we've
I'm
done
not.
this multiple times. So
Yeah, no,
we've asked the
I
same question.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm just, you said two different things. You said you can't do it, and then you said that exceptions had been made in the past. So I was just curious if exceptions were still possible and you're just recommending against it, or they're just absolutely not possible. That's my question.
Sorry. Exceptions are not possible.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner White?
Okay. There are many things I think that need to be answered, not many, but there's some things. But for me, I need a decision from the state parks on what baseline means. Is the road the way it is the baseline, or would it be allowed from the state perspective to improve it? The realignment is, I agree with you, that the realignment makes sense from an engineering point of view. The other thing is clarification on that 300 feet, roughly 300 feet between Hidden Hollow and the border of the conservation easement. Need some clarification on that, because I heard some comment here by one of the landowners that there may not be mutual understanding on that. So those two things.
All right, and I have just a couple of quick comments. I mean, most of my questions or comments have already been made by the other commissioners, but I do want to say that I really appreciate all the comments that were given tonight, both pro and con. It's not going to be an easy decision, and I'm not ready to make one tonight. So, it'll have to be, I think, at another meeting. But I also would like to recognize the drawings that were provided tonight and being able to see them in a lot more detail. And that was very helpful for me in understanding what we're actually talking about, both what's existing today and what's being proposed. So that was very helpful, and I really appreciate that. I do have concerns, specifically about the construction, traffic, noise, all of those things, in a wildlife sensitive, area. So that concerns me. I also understand, the position of the owners. I do feel for them and kind of being caught in between. So I do recognize that. And I also recognize that the commission is, our responsibility is to make sure that there's a minimum of impact on Observatory Mesa, and that's where I'm coming from. I haven't made a decision or anything like that, but I do see both sides, and I appreciate what we're looking at. And the whole idea of a performance bond, I hadn't even considered that. That, something that I think needs to be addressed. Accessory dwelling units, that's also, something that didn't occur to me, and I'd like to understand, the impact that might have, going forward. And also, as Commissioner White mentioned, that parcel that connects between Observatory Mesa and Hidden Hollow Road. I'd just like to understand all the implications there and make sure that that's considered. But other than that, I think we will have to continue at a future meeting, and do appreciate all the time we've spent tonight, which is considerable. Kevin?
And thanks. And these are just some notes I made after listening to public comments. So this is just for clarification, I guess, for the next meeting. One public commenter asked the Open Space Commission to not approve the revised easement. I just want to make sure everybody is clear. I think the commission is, but the public, that the Open Space Commission does not approve the revised easement. They make a recommendation. The council will approve or deny.